I've been a fan of trading card games for most of my life. Like many kids growing up, I too collected Pokemon cards. Whenever I talk about the Pokemon trading card game with someone, it will inevitably be brought up that nobody knew how to actually play the game, we just collected the cards. And I get to be that guy who says, I know how to play the game, but where did I learn? Pokemon Play It. Okay, I did that as a joke, but it is true. Pokemon, the trading card game for the Game Boy, was most likely the introduction on how to play the card game for others. There's something special about this game. As a kid, I enjoyed collecting the real cards. I'd get a few packs based on allowance money or good grades, but my collection was small compared to most kids. There were many cards I wanted as a kid that I never had in real life, such as my Gen 1 favorites Gengar and Scyther. However, while playing the game for the Game Boy, I could really collect them all. Well, almost all. A few real cards didn't make it into the game due to some Game Boy limitations, I imagine. I guess they just couldn't figure out how to make these cards work with the hardware they had at the time. There's nothing quite like the Pokemon trading card game for the Game Boy, and frankly, I don't think there ever will be. If I wanted to play Pokemon TCG today, I'd use Pokemon Live or play it in person. If I want to play vintage Pokemon, I can overpay for old cards and hope to find some other players, or I could just boot up something like Tabletop Sim and force one of my friends to play Pokemon with me. My only real option is to play the Game Boy game. The Game Boy games are more than just the TCG though. They have their own story and world to interact with. A world where everything revolves around Pokemon cards. The basic story works much like a mainline Pokemon game, where you must travel to 8 gyms and get the badges to then challenge the Elite Four and become the Pokemon Master. In the Pokemon TCG, you must go to 8 different card clubs, earn 8 coins, and then face off against the 4 Grandmasters to then become the world champion. Like a mainline Pokemon game, you also pick one of 3 starters, in this case being the Gen 1 starters. From there, you will earn packs and build onto this deck. After you have enough cards, you can start to build your own deck from scratch. What separates the TCG from the mainline titles is the whole map is open to you from the start. You're able to challenge the clubs in any order you want. You can also challenge any NPC as many times as you wish. Since there are no card shops to buy packs from in this world, you must challenge these NPCs to earn packs. Because of this, it might be more accurate to say that you will need to challenge these NPCs as many times as you wish in order to earn those packs. I find it very funny how anticlimactic it is to open packs up in this game. There's no fanfare at all. You just open the pack and bam, the first card you see is rare. It runs counter to how every pack opening video operates today. The rare is always the climax of the video, not the first thing you see. What rare you pull feels as random as it does in real life. And just like in real life, I never get the rare I want, and it's probably why I rarely open packs up anymore. Despite this being a Game Boy game, the cards do look like their real life counterparts. I think it's very impressive what they were able to do at the time. You have to remember that even if you're watching this on your phone, that screen is still larger and more vibrant than a Game Boy Color screen. I'm impressed they were able to translate the cards so well. They took the time to format them like the real cards too. Even as a kid, it kinda wowed me how close they were to the real thing. Reading cards in your hand might be a little clunky at first, but like card games in the tangible world, you'll pretty quickly know what your cards do based on name and art alone, making this almost a non-issue. Given the small amounts of real estate on screen, the way in which banished Pokemon and prize pools are handled works just fine. I think they also did a really good job trying to make the battle screen look as close as they could to the 2D battle screens from the Pokemon mainline titles. Outside battle, it also feels a bit like a mainline Pokemon game. I'm not sure how else to say this. I could just tell by looking at it that it is a Pokemon game. This was actually the first Pokemon game to have running, a feature not added into the mainline titles until Gen 3. I find it really charming that they use the red sprite as an NPC. I don't know, it just makes me happy to see him. Another thing I find charming is how all the NPCs have a little idle walking animation. They just all look so cute. I love how sometimes they sync with the music. Oh, and the music. Man, this is some of the best music ever put in a Pokemon game. This is a topic I wish to talk about because it's tangentially related to the Game Boy game. At the start of the game, I decided to pick the Squirtle deck, not just because Squirtle is my favorite Gen 1 starter, but because my goal was to rebuild the classic Rain Dance deck, a deck that utilizes Blastoise's Pokemon power. It lets me attach as many water energies as I wish to as many water Pokemon as I wish. Normally, you're only able to place one energy on one Pokemon per turn, and with the help of the Pokemon Breeder, I can actually skip Squirtle's second evolution, Wartortle, completely. That means you can have a Blastoise on turn 2, ready to KO any puny Pokemon your opponent has. Rain Dance was one of the best meta decks you could play in classic Pokemon, so much so that it was actually banned. As a matter of fact, you can build pretty much any classic meta deck from the basic through fossil era of the Pokemon trading card game. A couple of NPCs actually use a variation of the Mr. Mime stall deck. The Mr. Mime stall deck uses Mr. Mime to reflect your opponent's attacks if they hit for 30 or more. This means if an attack does 30 or more damage, it does 0 damage. While you use Mr. Mime to stall, you're building up your aces, while also using Alakazam to move those damage counters that do get through onto Chansey, since she has 120 HP and can tank it. With the addition of the Pokemon Center, you can also heal your Pokemon and drive your opponent crazy. The real goal of this deck is to make your opponent run out of cards in their deck. Back during the Rain Dance and Haymaker days, I didn't know what meta decks were. I don't even think I knew what meta meant. I doubt most kids did. You just played what cards you had and hoped for the best. With innocence, you built your deck for fun and with love. You cared about what Pokemon you liked, not what was good. It's that sort of conscious behavior you can never really recreate. You will learn what works, what's good and what's bad, and how to play the game better. If you don't try and optimize after learning what does work, you're choosing to do so. It's a conscious decision. Even with a card game, you can't go home again. Coming back to this game, I wasn't trying to go home again. I just wanted to build these really overpowered decks from the past and crush the game with it. It almost feels like I'm creating a false memory. I did experience that era of Pokemon, but I didn't really experience that era of Pokemon. Not like that. Coming back to the Game Boy game, I can also experience the Pokemon trading card game in its purest form. The early rules of the Pokemon trading card game are filled with game-breaking errors and clear mistakes made by the game makers, who either didn't fully playtest or assumed nobody would play the game that way. The Game Boy game uses these old rules. It makes these games feel like a time machine to a different era of Pokemon, a time before power creep, a time before they knew what balance was. The original rules allowed for you to play as many support cards as you wanted. There's a reason why they changed this to only allow one per turn. Anyone who's played a card game before knows the advantage of drawing multiple cards per turn. Imagine getting to do Ancestral Recall or Pot of Greed 4 times in a row with no cost added. Playing this game again, it felt more like Yu-Gi-Oh! Than Pokemon with how much absurd nonsense I could do in a single turn. Despite picking the Squirtle deck with the goal of making the Rain Dance deck, I never actually built it in the first game. By chance, I never got the Blastoise cards I needed until I was already near the end of the game. While I was grinding, I did start to notice that I was slowly gaining the cards I needed for the Haymaker deck. So I decided I might as well build the actual best deck in the game instead of the second best. The thing that made the Haymaker deck so powerful was the Pokemon it used. Each Pokemon in the deck has 70 HP and can attack from 30 to 70 HP. I understand that by modern standards, those numbers are pitiful, but for 1998, that was actually a really good rate. It was likely that your opponent was still building by the time you started to pummel them with a turn 1 Hitmonchan or Electabuzz. If you started with a Scyther, as long as you drew into a double energy card, you were dealing 30 damage by turn 2 or 3. Scyther could also be recalled for no cost. Most Pokemon require you to remove energy cards to recall them. Scyther does not. Scyther also slotted well into every Haymaker deck because his only attack that deals damage costs 3 colorless pips. If you didn't know, a colorless pip means that any energy color will work. And if you're wondering about Swords Dance, then don't. In real life, the Haymaker and Rain Dance decks were so good that both of them were banned before the Team Rocket set came out. But here in the Game Boy game, nothing is banned. Using these decks in the game, it feels a little like cheating. Even when I played with Haymaker half belt, it still felt too easy. It seems I've spent more time talking about the card game over the video game itself, but the truth is both are interlinked in my mind. As I segue into the second game, I'll bridge the gap with something that both share. In the video games, much like the tangible world, you could trade cards with your friends. What you might trade reminds me of how trading cards worked back in the day. There was no understanding of a card's value. There was zero regard to a PSA ranking or if the card was shadowless. And there's something innocent about it. It feels pure, like this is how the game was supposed to be enjoyed. I was very close to making this video about the Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Game Boy games. That changed after playing the second Pokemon game. Now I only want to talk about Pokemon. I never played it as a kid, and in all likelihood, you didn't either if you're a Westerner. Unless you were or knew someone in Japan at the time, since the game never left Japan. Side note, during the Gen 2 era of Pokemon, I knew a Japanese-American kid who had a copy of Silver before the rest of us, because he picked it up when him and his family were visiting Japan. And this was in a time before the internet, so all we did was crowd around him and watch in awe as he showed us off all the new Pokemon that we didn't know yet. We kept asking him what their names were and what they did. It was quite a fun time. The second game is called Pokemon Trading Card Game 2, GR Dansanju. In English, that's Pokemon Trading Card Game 2, Team Great Rocket is here. Speaking of English, the only reason I can play this in English is because of the hard work done by the translator, Armides251, who translated this game. I don't know who you are or anything about you, but thanks for translating it. Pokemon Trading Card Game 2, GR Dansanju, came out in 2001, 2 years after Gold and Silver. Just looking at it, you can tell that this is a newer Game Boy Color game. The map is almost unchanged aside from an airport in the south. They did revamp the club interiors quite a lot. In the first game, the lobbies were all identical and plain. The only difference among them was the club emblems on the lobby floor. In Pokemon Trading Card Game 2, GR Dansanju, the club lobbies all have more personality based around that club's theme. While you don't spend more than a couple of seconds in these lobbies, the added flair is welcome. It makes the club feel more alive. The battle rooms for these clubs are also changed around. The changes are fine, but I do prefer the water club looking like a pool instead of a fake indoor beach. The thought of playing a card game next to a pool makes me uneasy. The thought of playing a card game with sand under my feet makes me feel even worse. That being said, it doesn't look awful by any means. Also, the sprite for red is still here, and it still makes me happy. A very welcome addition to the game that they didn't need to add is these reaction faces based on how the match is going. In the first game, the profiles were all static. In Pokemon Trading Card Game 2, GR Dansanju, they changed depending on if the NPC is winning, losing, or drawing a card that will help them out. It's basic, but it does make them feel more like a real person. I've been playing card games on and off for most of my life, and I've seen the faces my opponent makes when they draw that life-saving card to flip the game. I know it seems like such a small thing, but what you might not know is that no two NPCs share a portrait. They took the time to add these reactions to every single NPC in the game, and I think the game is better for it. Pokemon Trading Card Game 2, GR Dansanju has an actual story also. It's nothing too complex, even for a Pokemon game, but it is welcome. Team Great Rocket shows up to the island and somehow steals everyone's Pokemon cards, including yours. That's right, you're gonna get Metroided. Not only that, but they also rounded up all the club members and are now holding them as POWs. Only you as the player can now save the world and get everyone's Pokemon cards back. Your former rival Ronald is also here to help out. He acts more like a friend after he's been humbled enough times in the first game. This might be one of the only Pokemon games that has a direct sequel with reoccurring characters and the same protagonist. Not only are most, if not all, of the NPCs back from the first game, but they actually acknowledge that you're the champion. If someone wants to challenge you, they're seeing if you're worth your title. They don't treat you like you're some nobody. And by the way, because it was in Crystal, you can play as a girl in this game. Nothing really changes, and it's just retcon that you were a girl in the first game too. The game is broken up into two different acts, if you will. The first is battling the members of Team Great Rocket on your home island who invaded. Once they're all defeated, the player will then earn a special coin that allows them to travel to the second location, an archipelago that's controlled by Team Great Rocket. This is where the real game begins. You must earn special coins at each fortress to progress on the archipelago. Everything on your home island was just the warm-up to make sure you had enough cards to face the real challenge. And this place might actually be a challenge. I already went into great detail about this before, but in the first game you could construct your deck in any way you liked. That does apply to Pokemon Trading Card Game 2, GR Dansanju, but on the archipelago, they added some challenge. When battling in the fortresses, the NPCs will refuse to face you if your deck has certain cards in it. They'll demand that you change your deck to contain specific cards. This can range from not using certain color energy or asking you to use specific Pokemon. They typically want the match to be in their favor. At the Fire Fortress, they might require you to use only fire energies to try and keep you from using water Pokemon and sway you into using fire types. At the Lightning Gym, you might be forced to use 4 Pikachus in your deck. These are traps. In that first example, the NPC will actually have water Pokemon even though they're in the Fire Fortress. And in the latter example, she'll use rock types to crush your poor Pikachus. I have mixed feelings about this system. On the positive side, it does challenge the player to play decks that are outside their comfort zone. If you love deck building, this might be the best part of the game for you. On the flip side, it does become really tedious to rebuild your deck every single battle. The NPC requirements can also be really annoying. If they tell you that you need 4 Pikachus in your deck and you don't have them, well, now you have to go find them. First, you're gonna have to find what pack Pikachu comes in. Then you're gonna have to find an NPC that gives you those packs when they lose. Then, you need to defeat that opponent over and over again until you get your play set of Pikachus, which will happen randomly. It's down to luck with how long it will take. While I don't mind using Rain Dance to grind packs, it is quite annoying that I'm at the mercy of blind luck to get cards I need in order to advance the game. I thought the deck restrictions were cute at first, but the concept overstayed its welcome by the time I made it to the 4th fortress. Any problems I might have with these games, I still find them very fun. I greatly enjoyed revisiting the first game again. I lament that I can't find my original cartridge from when I was a kid. I would have loved to see what decks I constructed back then and considered good. Despite my few complaints, I greatly enjoyed playing Pokemon Trading Card Game 2, GR Dansanju. I find the story silly but also charming. The big boss of Team Great Rocket acts as if collecting and hoarding Pokemon cards is on the same level of amassing military might. In his eyes, only the strong deserve Pokemon cards. After he's defeated, he learns an important lesson. Pokemon cards are about enjoying the hobby with your friends, not hoarding them all to yourself. Facing you, he learned what it meant to have fun. He happily gives everyone's cards back and wishes to challenge you again, not as a bad guy, but as a friend. I know I meandered a bit with my thesis on this, but I don't believe that they'll ever make a virtual card game this way ever again. We live in a different time now. Why sell people a single game with a limited number of cards when you can sell them packs of new sets with real money? Online. The masses don't want a card game with a story, they want a card game in digital form. And I get it. I do find it a little sad though, that games like this could only exist in a pre-internet world. I think the modern version of this game could still work, but I don't think it'd be very interesting to most people. It's a bit of a shame too, because I know there'll never be anything like the Pokemon trading card game for the Game Boy ever again.